Tēnā koutou e hiuhiu mai nei I tēnei rā, and I hope that you can hear us both.
Yes, we can.
Ko Jill Hoki tōku ingoa, I'm the Executive Director at the Christchurch Methodist Mission.
Ko Jane Higgins tōku ingoa, I'm the Strategic Advisor at the Mission.
So the Christchurch Methodist Mission is a social service organisation of Tahahi Weteriana, or Aotearoa, the Methodist Church of New Zealand, and we operate in Canterbury, Nelson, Marlborough and the West Coast. So why do we have an interest in this bill? Well, the early Wesleyan Church actively supported and promoted Te Tiriti o Waitangi. In 1840, the Methodist Mission at Mangungu in the Hokianga Harbour hosted one of the largest signings of Te Tiriti. And so the Methodist Church, therefore, has a particular responsibility to honour the faith that those signatories placed in its missionary forebears, and today continues to honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi as a founding document of our nation. Over 40 years ago, the church committed itself to working biculturally, and since that time, all major decisions within the church are made when there is agreement between the taha Māori and Tauiwi. So Te Tiriti o Waitangi is an agreement between Māori and the Crown, and to propose this bill without any meaningful engagement with Māori is unacceptable.
For our time with you today, we would like to speak to, or from our experience as a social service agency, because we think this has something to offer the discussion. And so we draw your attention to our points 5 and 6 in our written submission. These address the impact of breaches of Te Tiriti. In our work, we see daily the impact of breaches of Te Tiriti. For example, among those that our Housing First team works with, and these are people who have been long-term homeless, half are Māori, where only 13% of the Christchurch or Tatahi population is Māori. Among our social service clients and in our preschool, again, there is significant overrepresentation of Māori. In fact, our only service where Māori are underrepresented is in our aged care facility, and a significant reason for that is that Māori have a lower life expectancy than Pākehā. Similar systemic inequities can be found across the country, overrepresentation of Māori in poverty, housing insecurity and poor health outcomes. We know that these inequities are closely associated with breaches of Te Tiriti, with land alienation and cultural assimilation. For example, here in Canterbury, the Crown's failure to honour Kemp's purchase deprived 5 generations of Ngāi Tahu of their livelihood by taking their economic base from them. The history is very clear on this, the impact is ongoing, and we see it daily.
We have the tools to address this impact through the already existing principles that the Waitangi Tribunal and the courts have developed, in particular principles of te tino rangatiratanga, equity, partnership, redress, good faith, active protection and so on. We're gravely concerned that the bill replaces these principles, in fact actively excludes them from consideration where such treaty principles would be relevant, and yet these are the mechanisms by which breaches of Te Tiriti and the impact of these breaches can be addressed. In contrast with the established principles, the principles proposed in this bill cannot address the inequities that we see on a day-to-day basis in our work. And so we'll stop there and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you both. Thank you for your submission. Members, I'll open up to questions, and the first one is from Stephen Abel.
Kia ora, yeah, thank you very much for your very powerful submission. Going back to that original conversation that happened between Māori and missionaries, is it your view that it was beyond comprehensible that Māori would be intentionally ceding sovereignty?
I'm certainly not a church historian, but certainly I don't think that there was any understanding that Māori was ceding sovereignty at that time.
My follow-up is, in terms of what you talked about, the impact of land alienation and cultural assimilation on outcomes for Māori. Do you think, in a sense, this bill is in that tradition of assimilationist acts of Parliament, insofar as it has the effect of nullifying the Māori right to self-determination?
Yes, I think that puts it very well. I think at the heart of this discussion is, if you like, a discussion about cultural identity. And cultural identity is not a simple thing, but this bill glazes over any sense that we have different cultures, and in particular that there is Indigenous culture in this country. And so in our work, we work really hard to be culturally responsive to people who come to us, and we know that by being culturally responsive, by recognising in particular, for example, tikanga, that our clients respond very well to that, and that their own well-being is deeply tied up with that tikanga and their cultural identity. So to try to say that everyone is the same in a way that I think this bill is doing great harm to people who are not of the dominant culture, which is essentially Pākehā.
Got it. Thank you. We'll go to a question from Takata first, and then Duncan, if you have one as well.
Tēnā kōrua. Mea kōrua mahi. So thank you for your work that you do down there in Ngāi Tahu land. I'm a descendant of Ngāi Tahu, and I appreciate you referencing Kemp's purchase and the ongoing economic impact that eventually led to all of the social and health and every other depravity that Māori endure. So my question too is, there's a lot of resource going down the drain right here. So what are some ideas that you might be able to give the government for, maybe it's a better place to direct that resource to get some better outcomes, given that Māori in the South Island have had to suffer 5 generations with no economic base? What are some other ways that the government might deploy its resources to help raise the health of Māori across the board?
Oh, that's a very, very large question, but certainly that conversation needs to be held in consultation and together with Māori. But certainly the things that we're seeing is the need for housing. That's a major issue for us. And we know it's a major issue through the country. We talked about, we've got 90 people on our waiting list at the moment for Housing First. So people have been homeless for over a year. They need housing. We really need to be building more housing that's actually suitable for people. So that's only one area. Right across the board in terms of mental health, good, strong early childhood education. There are certainly places that we could be putting our resources rather than an expensive select committee process.
I think also just to acknowledge that people are experts in their own well-being, and their cultural identity is an absolutely fundamental part of their well-being. And so to recognise that cultural identity and to recognise that people become healthy within an environment that recognises and honours their mana, I think is very important.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou.
Cool, thank you, Doctor. Is there any further questions?
Yeah, I will ask mine if I may, James. It was touched on. Look, there's a lot of narrative around this about having different rights based on ethnicity and better rights for Māori. And some of the stuff you've said today has actually touched on that. But I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the actual work you do and how taking a treaty principles approach gives better outcomes for all of the people that you help here in Christchurch today.
Well, certainly if I look at our Housing First service, we really work hard to operate on a bicultural model there and actually recognise that 50% of the people we work with are Māori. And so that impacts on the staff who we employ through things like karakia waiata being a very much a part of the work that we do, and for a lot of Māori actually helping to re-engage with whānau, hapu and iwi, who they may have become disconnected with over time.
Thank you both. Thank you, Duncan. I appreciate your time with us this afternoon and for providing your submission. Thank you.
Sorry for the clickety clacks there, guys. I hope that, because I finally figured out that I actually had to mute my microphone from using the program Restream, not from my own mic, because I was like pushing the mute button and I was like, why can people still hear me clicking and clacking away? Okay, so hopefully I've sorted that now. Right, Nick, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a really interesting submission. I mean, we're seeing a similar theme there around a renegotiation of existing principles and rights, and that any form of new principles or new treaty principles cannot deal with existing inequity. And I thought that was an interesting way to put it. The thing that really captured me though was around how the presenters spoke about that. Well, it was the question of Duncan. He asked the question around how can, through a utility-based approach, how can everyone benefit? And I thought that was a really interesting way that the two presenters approached that question through talking about housing. And I think that's a really nice way to look at that question. So yeah, those were the things that really jumped out at me through that one.
Inequity is something that impacts all people, regardless of their ethnicity. The problem here that we've had is the Crown has breached the treaty time and time again. And being Ngāi Tahu myself as well, my ancestors had to sell their land to the Crown below market value. And in doing that, they lost the means to generate wealth, which back then was agriculture, and you needed land to do that. The Māori didn't have these biotech labs back in the 1800s, like we do today, or AI or anything like that, or IT or tech services. They had to learn how to do farming, right, the European way, and export to the European market, and that was taken away from them. It had a big discount for the Crown, and the Crown benefited and gave a lot of that land to Pākehā buyers, and Pākehā buyers generated a ton of wealth. Hence why we see today huge inequities between Māori and Pākehā, and people say, oh, why are Māori getting special rights? And it's like, because the treaty, the way how the Crown upheld their obligations, well, they didn't. They just chopped the knees off Māori to be able to generate their own money. So that's why Māori now are in a position where they have to rely more on government handouts. If the Crown...
It goes back to the argument around the presumption within the argument that everyone starts from the same start line.
Yes.
And there is a presumption within this equity argument that Seymour and his supporters put forward, that in order for everyone to receive the same services, everyone must start from the same start line in order to achieve equity. But within that, there's a presumption that everyone starts at the same start line, which we all know is just absolute bollocks, because, I mean, it's clear and it's obvious through all of the presentations that we've seen, and pretty much everyone has demonstrated that there's just so much inequity and so much, it's just not true. And if everyone is not starting from the same start line, then you need to change your approach in order to lift people up to even conceptually begin at the same start line. So that's why the approaches need to be different for different communities.
The way how I like to explain equity to people is you can have the same length of track, and you could technically start at the same point. The difference is that one track has got less crap in the way, right? For Māori people, you've got barbed wire that you've got to jump over. You've got, a little ravine or a little river, like a gorge where there's a crocodile with his mouth open, waiting to eat you. You've got all these hurdles in the way, and disabled people face this as well, and other ethnic minorities, right? Where the government has not given them the proper care that they deserve as citizens, aka justifying taking land away from Māori, being an example. But yes, so basically you've got all this crap in the way of the track, and you're asking the Māori citizen, run over that. Meanwhile, next to that track, you've got a Pākehā person who's got less crap in the way. They've still got crap in the way because they're not a billionaire or anything. We're talking about the average white person here. There's still crap in the way. There's just less of it. So it's a bit more easier for them to get to the finish line than the Māori person.
Well, and actually they do get to the finish line. And from that presentation, we heard that not every Māori person gets to the finish line because we've heard about the rates of when Māori die, because they die much sooner than the average, so not everyone even gets to the finish line. But your point is well made, and it's very true.
And some Māori people do get to the finish line,
and they do. Absolutely. Yep.
But the percentage is less.
That's right.
You get some people go, oh look, see, Hone pulled himself up by his bootstraps. Why can't you? And it's like, I don't know, maybe because Hone's built differently. I don't know, but there's the fact that there are less people getting to the finish line and there are more Pākehā people crossing the finish line implies that there's a bit of a problem here. There's no equality there.
And that's where you get back into that whole neoliberal pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Why can't you do it? Because that person, So, and that's just not.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram.